Right, so today's planting is going to be a little bit of a strange one because this is a tree that's quite nostalgic to me, but I didn't think I'd be able to plant one because I wasn't aware they were climatically somewhat suitable versions. So this is a magnolia, and most of the magnolias I'm familiar with are the sort of low sprawling ones, which are quite common in European and South African gardens. They're very, very beautiful, very sort of aromatic when in flower, and very odorous once the flowers have dropped off and are on the ground, but they're really quite nostalgic trees for me because my grandmother had one in her garden my entire life in the UK, but I really wasn't aware that they were sort of warm weather ones. Now this is a warm weather one, and that actually might be the bigger problem because most of the time when you see them around Lusaka you see some of the cold weather ones planted and they really don't thrive because it just gets a little bit too hot and it just sets them back a little bit. This one can't stomach frost and it really doesn't want to dry out, especially when it's young. Now this is actually grown from seed from a nursery only about 1.5 kilometers away from us, so it should be pretty tolerant of our sort of general climate, but nurseries tend to water quite a lot because they have a lot of plants in bags, and this is in an area where, yeah, I will water it at least once a week while it's young and tender, but I don't want to be watering it its whole life. So we're going to solve the problems with sort of two solutions. So the first problem is the heat. We're going to protect it from frost, which is going to be the big issue rather than the sort of lack of heat. We're going to protect it from frost by surrounding it with lots of companion plants. So we're going to go with a couple of pieces of Trina fragrans, one of which is going to be to the north, one of which is going to be to the west. So that should shade its base from the afternoon sun, stop the base from drying out so it sort of gets the impression of being slightly wetter, but it'll also stop any excess sort of frost cooling at night. We're then going to be putting in the magnolia itself, which I think is Magnolia Champak, but I might be wrong. They will be up on the screen. And then we're going to be putting in a nice little piece of the Moonshine Sansevieria, which is one of the Sansevieria trifasciata. I was going to put standard, but it was all in flower, so I thought I would use one that wasn't because they don't like being transplanted when in flower generally. And we're going to be putting in some of our shell ginger, which should also spread out, and these together should form quite a nice sort of dense thicket around the base of it, really reduce the risk of it drying out. And finally we're going to be adding in some pieces of Kalanchoe pinnata, which should also spread out nicely quite quickly as well, which is one of the sort of drawbacks with things like the Sansevieria, and that should really shelter the ground, which will not only stop it from drying out, will also really stop it from cooling down as fast on wintry nights. We're really not likely to get a frost at this time of year. I think we've passed our risk of frost. We don't get frosts most years, but there is a risk, and when this is young and tender I really don't want that to be something that happens to it and sort of toasts it. We're also going to be doing this all in a slight pit, which means that we can then water it quite a lot more heavily. Magnolias generally don't want to be sitting in water, but we are on sand, so that will drain quite well, and probably once its roots are filled out a bit, it'll sort of lift itself above and sort of lift the soil a little bit, so it won't be sitting down in the same way. This is a non-buttressing species, but it will still sort of thicken out, and that will sort of push the soil, so the pit will disappear once it's big enough to really sort of suffer if it was sitting in water. I mean, this will swallow the pit once it's big enough. And then we're also going to be making sure it stays a little bit warmer and a little bit wetter by sort of surrounding this area in over future plantings with some more trees. So we're on the northwestern edge of where the kapok is, and I haven't really been planting out here yet much, but hopefully once the rains come in I'll be able to put a lot of little more tender things in here, and before that I'll be putting some of the hardier, sort of more sun-tolerant things into this area, so that will form another sort of nice sort of wind slowing and sort of frost slowing sort of barrier around this, and it should hopefully do well. Right, so that should be everything for today. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you have enjoyed it, and if you haven't enjoyed it, thank you for watching anyway. Please tune in again tomorrow. I will be planting something else, possibly some things else. I haven't decided yet, but we'll see.